everyone. I'm Charna Davis-Wiese, and welcome to UCF Expressions, a half hour about the arts and artists of the University of Central Florida. You know, young people of this millennium are calling themselves and being called the millennials, and some people say they have what it takes to possibly be the greatest generation ever. Join me in welcoming Dr. Lisa Mills from the UCF Film Department, and Lisa is a filmmaker of a new documentary about the millennials, and kindred spirit, former TV person. Yes. There's a lot of us out there. Mm-hmm. We'll be left like the National Geographics and the cockroaches, right?
We're still working.
We're still working. Isn't that amazing? Thanks so much for coming out. I am loving this information, and I didn't, before I found out about your film, I didn't know about this, and I have 3 millennials. The very tail end, my youngest just makes it by 3 months, and when I read the trends that are causing their generation to possibly have the tools to be so great and the characteristics of them, it was like the aha moment. This is really true. Tell us a little bit about what they are and what they've got going for them.
Well, the millennials are the people that were born in 1982 and after. So the first ones that were born were really the children of the baby boomers, and now the ones that are being born are sort of the children of the Gen Xers. And they just have a lot of interesting things about them that have people wondering if they might have what it takes to be the next great generation. And the thesis of the documentary that Linda Chapin and I made is that they really have no choice other than to be the next great generation, because we have so many issues reaching a crisis point right now. And this is the generation that's going to have to find a way to work together to face these issues, from global warming to terrorism to bioethics and everything in between. They're going to have to figure out what to do. So the documentary takes a look at political, cultural, and social issues and the values of these young people coming up to try to determine whether or not they have what it takes. And we really don't provide an answer at the end of the documentary. It's up to the—
We won't know for 40 years.
It's the interpretation of the viewer, and we provide some evidence, and hopefully, I think that after people see the documentary, they'll feel more optimistic about the future.
And I think, you know, reading the trends that is changing this generation, and looking at my own family and my children who are millennials, and looking at my mother and her comments on how we're raising our kids, the trends of the focus on the family and the focus on the child is probably stronger now than it's been in decades.
That's right. What happened was we had a generation, sort of our generation, we were the first latchkey kids. We were the ones that grew up when the women went back into the workforce.
Open the door, come back for dinner.
Right. We got back from school, we went into the house, took care of ourselves until mom and dad got home from work. And we came up and we decided that we wanted our children to have it differently. And so the people our age that are raising these millennials are extremely involved in their childhoods. They put them into structured athletics, a lot of extracurricular activities. We're keeping a close eye on them. We are nurturing them. We're raising them with a very high self-esteem. And so the idea is that they will go out and they will help to resolve some of these issues that are reaching this crisis point. Now, this is the same trend that we saw in the generation that came up that wound up fighting and winning World War II. They were very nurtured by their parents. And so we have Bill Strauss in the documentary. He and Neil Howe came up with all of these generational theories upon doing research of all the generations. And Bill Strauss says history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And that's a perfect way to describe what's happening right now. It's sort of an echo of the boomers and the Gen Xers, the millennials now coming up. They're more socially involved, they're more politically involved. They're more religious, they're much closer to their family, they love to work in groups, they're collaborators, and then of course everybody knows how technically savvy they are. And so Linda Chapin and I felt like there had been a lot of attention to the technical side of the millennials. We know they're great with computers. We know they have great test scores now. We know that they're coming up and they're very entrepreneurial. So what Linda Chapin and I wanted to find out was, are they politically engaged? Are they socially engaged? Are they culturally aware? Because Strauss and Howe say they are, and that's why they believe they will be the next great generation.
We have the intro, the actual open of the movie, and I think it's really riveting to actually hear these young people and what they talk about. Can we take a look at it?
Sure.
Let's take a look.
Two hijacked airliners full of explosive flight fuel slam into New York's packed World Trade Center towers, collapsing. A third crashes into the Pentagon while a fourth blows back outside. It's been a huge explosion.
What worries me about the future is the state in which we'll receive it from the people who have the power right now.
They saw Hurricane Katrina, they saw the hurt, and you know, I think we would learn from that.
Jeffrey, my brother, is going to Iraq in September, and I just, you know, if anything happened to him.
Global warming, my biggest concern is that people think that it's a belief, and in my mind, global warming and evolution, all that stuff is not a belief system.
The most important thing my generation needs to do is take control.
I was almost a little surprised at the one young woman who said, I don't know anything about this, because I have a 5th grader and I have a 2nd grader and an 8th grader. Of course the 8th grader knows about it, but the 5th and 2nd graders are really, from what they're learning in school, they know what's going on in the world. They are involved in it, and I think because of the internet, they feel part of the global mindset and everything that happens. They feel closer to people way across the other side of the earth than we did, I think.
Well, there is that assumption. There's the assumption that because young people are tied into this global internet, that they're more aware of what's going on around the world and politically. But we interviewed some helicopter parents about
the ones that hover?
Yes. We
I'm
interviewed
a parent,
them.
I've heard this.
And what they told us was that they see their kids on the internet, but they're not going to websites to learn that much about politics or global issues. They're in these social networks, right. And they're very insular, these social networks, and they talk to each other about the same things that you and I talk to our friends with on the telephone.
Right.
And so Linda and I we wanted to provide a well-rounded and balanced picture of the millennials. The truth is that they are more socially aware, they are more politically aware in general, but not always. And so the documentary isn't 100% positive about the millennials. And the millennials themselves admit they've got it great and they know it. And we interview an Army ROTC cadet, and she is very straightforward about the fact that she thinks her generation is just spoiled and that they need to work harder to take care of these issues. And I think that most of the millennials we talk to are aware that they need to step up. They need to do something, but they're afraid of this complacency that they have. They're actually afraid of how insulated they are with the internet, and they feel like they'd like to see their friends get out more and see more and do more. So they're not the perfect generation, but as I said, and as Neil Howe and Bill Strauss have said, even if they're not perfect, these social and political forces are going to push them into a position where they're going to have to step up. So people our age have got to make sure they're prepared.
I think that my kids are very lucky because they just happen to have social studies teachers that do current events with them and bring them into it at all of their levels. And I know that my oldest had said to me that we almost have to be politically aware because of how our world is. Mm-hmm. And he was talking about all these different things of the forces that are forcing them to learn about what's going on the other side of the world. And we started talking about the political climate and how polarized it is. And his teacher, who my daughter has now, has them talk about the presidential elections and who's saying the right thing. It's got to be somewhere in the middle. And we talked, and he said, everyone says that we're more patriotic now, but there's so much vitriol. And we thought even the fighting shows that people are more engaged than they ever were before. It's such a different society than it was 15 years ago.
Well, the boomers were the me generation. Okay, they were out there, and while it's true they were in the protest march and the civil rights movement, eventually, you know, they were out for their careers, and the Gen Xers became very, very individually aware of themselves. And out for, you know, women, it's my career. You know, I'm going to be an individual, I'm going to be independent, I'm going to work my way up through the glass ceiling or whatever. What we're seeing with the millennials is, again, they're more collaborative. They've
been so involved in teams since they were 4 years old.
That's exactly it. And so they do want to work together to solve these problems, and they're worried about those problems.
It's almost, you know, you think that these children almost in a way did not have a childhood, because at least the ones that were my kids' age, they don't remember a time before terrorism.
And they're so stressed. I see that at UCF as a college assistant professor. They are multitasking all the time with all of their gadgets, and you know, we look at that and we think, oh, that's so cute. You know, they're on their computer, they've got their iPod in, they're text messaging somebody, but it adds stress to their day,
going in their brain.
And they feel a lot of pressure to succeed. And you know, when I graduated from college, I wasn't in $20,000 or $30,000 worth of debt. These kids are, and there is another author that I read that wrote a book about these pressures and about how they are going to be a successful generation, but they are a very worried generation as well. And you're right, maybe it's because they were so busy in all of these team sports that they didn't just sit at their coloring book.
With the mixture of the structured lives and the terrorism they've always known. We'll be right back. We have so much more to talk with. Don't go away.
Attendance, people, listen up. Albertson. Here. Barnes. Here. Swain.
Here.
Reyes.
Here.
Perez.
Here.
Clark.
Here.
Gerbic.
Here.
Sellers.
Here.
Nguyen.
Here.
Tomei.
Here.
And Miller.
Here.
In our classrooms and throughout our community, UCF stands for opportunity.
FIA, the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy. Don't just get into the gaming industry, lead it.
We're talking with Dr. Lisa Mills, and she is a filmmaker here at UCF, and we are talking about the documentary she has done about the millennials, the latest generation of young adults. Some are becoming young adults now, some are still kids. And I love to tell people what it's like behind the scenes. You see an hour documentary, you don't realize it's probably a year went into it, 40 hours a day, if it's possible, 24/7. Tell me about the making of the film documentary. We're both from television. I've never worked in anything but television. You say the transition from TV to film was really not what you expected.
No, I found a lot of differences. I had been a television news producer for about 25 years and then went out to UCF and was teaching the TV news classes at UCF. And that was a lot of fun. I did it for 8 years, and then I moved over from the School of Communication to the School of Film and Digital Media to work in their documentary program. And making a documentary film is very different. You don't have the deadline pressure that you have in television, and you also don't have to fit your documentary into a 30-minute window or exactly 1 hour window. You have a little flexibility that way, but that's just structurally. What was different for me was walking around in a department where the people who were teaching about film considered themselves artists, and they really are. And I've never felt like an artist. I love to tell stories.
I almost felt like I was a puzzle maker. You had all these pieces on the floor, and you had to put it together.
Oh, that's a great analogy. I loved photography, and when I started reading about film documentary, it made sense to me that really documentary is a genre where art meets journalism, where they come together. I mean, John Grierson, a famous documentary pioneer, said that documentary is the creative treatment of actuality. And I guess I always felt working in news that I did that every day, but the difference in film is I can have an opinion. I can have a point of view now.
I still think I don't have one. I'm not in news anymore, and it becomes a part of your soul.
You are still trying to deliver the truth to the audience, but the truth has a definite message behind it. And that was new to me, to take the time to look at all of the interviews that I shot and listen to what the people were saying and really put a lot of thought and a little more time behind deciding which of the interviews to put together, where the different segues would be, how much to use the experts, how much to use the interviews with the millennials. What we wound up doing was we focused on 4 millennials, a 25-year-old running for office, a drama student, an environmentalist, and an Army cadet.
How'd you find them? Part of being a producer is actually finding your guests, and that's sometimes, for me here, because there are so many people to choose from, it's a very hard thing to do.
Well, being at UCF, doing a documentary on millennials was pretty easy because we were able to connect to the students. And one was a graduate of UCF, one was a graduate student at UCF, one was an Apopka High School student, and one was an ROTC cadet at UCF. So it took a little bit of networking, and our associate producers, millennial associate producers, worked with us on the project. But we found them, and we focused on the 4 of them, and so I guess the audience can take a look at these 4 very different millennials and hear them say sort of the same things, and at the end they can draw a conclusion on where a student in the arts will take us, where a political young person will take us, an environmentalist, and someone in the military, where they're going to lead us in the next 10, 20 years.
Did you see differences in them?
I did see differences in them. Some of them were more judgmental of their generation than others. Some of them are more optimistic than others, I think, but they're all confident. They all have high self-esteems, and they all are very cooperative and sweet and nice. This is a nice generation of students. Yes, they're very polite.
Do you know why I think? You know, one of the things I read in the trends is that used to be mom and dad had a babysitter every Saturday night and went out, and the kids were home. And we go out with the kids now. They're so much a part of society and so much of a part of the family, and interact with adults so much. I think they've learned to be polite. They've learned how to behave.
Yes. There are weaknesses to this generation as well, and we talk about those a little bit in the documentary, and some of them were brought forward because of experiences that Linda and I had at UCF and teaching students, and we noticed some troubling things about them. They need a lot of direction. I don't think this generation is as independent as you and I.
They had the helicopter parents.
Yes. When you give them directions on a project you want them to do in class, you're going to get 4 or 5 emails. Well, okay, you want me to cite this, but you know, exactly how do you want me to do that? They want you to tell them exactly how things ought to be done, and they're very uncomfortable with assignments that give them some leeway. They would really prefer to have a bulleted list given to them, and they know precisely what to do to win your praise, to win your approval. And it's very uncomfortable for them to sit back and not know exactly what you're thinking about this paper, and you know, and that's also a part of growing up and becoming more mature, you know. So that's one of the difficulties in teaching. It's not teaching students how to do things. For me, the difficulty is allowing my students to fail, because that's really where the learning happens.
Right, and we hear that so many times, but it's still so hard. It's still so hard. Let's take a look at what a little piece you did, a promo for the College of Arts and Humanities, and we'll talk about the making of that. Let's take a look at that.
Camera comes back around like that.
What we're looking for here is action and excitement of filmmaking process.
I think I'll rescale it and then move it down.
That's a good start on this.
And then over that, there'll be the text, you know, explore.
Cool. All right. You want to take out your guitar?
Great.
Well, there it was. That little, 30 seconds, and the making of the.
Yes.
That probably took a lot more time and a lot more energy and effort than anybody has any idea. The more edits you have, the more work that went into it.
Well, what we wanted to do was make a promo that would run in our new stadium up on the new Jumbotron that would show people the value of the College of Arts and Humanities. We hear a lot about the medical college, and that's so exciting, and engineering and computer science and all of these high-tech industry partnerships with the university. And we want to make sure people realize that the arts are alive and well at UCF, the performing arts, the fine arts. We're there, and I know that President Hitt believes that those are important as well for our university. And so making that promo was a lot of fun with the students. It did take a lot of work. I don't know if the public realizes that faculty members, the teaching part is just about 1/3 of what you do. You also have so many service projects that you're doing in your research, which is my documentary filmmaking. So we're all pretty busy out there, but we all enjoy it or we wouldn't be there.
Talking about busy, tell me about your next projects. You're working on 4 things at once.
That's right.
You ride your bicycle to work. You've got all this other stuff going on. You've got film festivals. I don't know, when do you sleep?
I try to get some sleep. One of the documentaries I'm working on is a documentary about the challenge of riding a bicycle to work.
Especially
Orlando.
in Florida in the summer. Have you done it through the summer? Have you done it that way?
I have indeed, and I was inspired when I was teaching in Sweden, because over there everybody rides a bike to work. So that's one of the documentaries. I've got a documentary on the legendary Sam Rivers, a jazz legend who lives in Central Florida, a documentary on Wally Nelson, a retired rocket scientist in Central Florida. And, oh, I don't know. I have a lot of ideas and not enough time to do all of them.
You talk about the change, the difference between TV and film. If you were in TV, you couldn't do those all at once because you'd have to have them all by the 6.
Right.
You got to have them on the 6 and then replay them on the 11 and recut it for the 11. It's just some TV lingo that you usually had to have it on the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah,
and then change it and have 5 hours to do it. Tell me about the bicycle riding one. I'm really intrigued by that. To go actually see and live in a different culture where it's probably, I'm sure if so many people do it, it's made easier for them to do.
Well, this was part of an exchange program where I went to Sweden and taught television production there, and while I was there, everybody rides a bike to work. There aren't parking lots at office buildings and universities, there are bike lots. And I thought, well, this is so much fun, I'm going to do this when I go back to Orlando. And the first few times I did it, I was terrified.
I would
and
think so.
So I decided.
Which street are you actually going on?
I go down Alafaya Trail on my bicycle, and I was inspired to do it by an inconvenient truth. And so this will be a different kind of documentary for me because it'll be in the first person, and it's in the form of a letter. So the title of the documentary is going to be Dear Mr. Gore.
This is way harder than you thought, right?
Well, I think that the thesis is going to be that even if we had plenty of bike lanes and even if we had accommodations for people at work to shower and get ready for work once they get there, what it takes to decrease our global footprint, if you will, is a personal determination to do it. And so I just try to ride my bike to work at least one day a week. It's a 24-mile round trip. I get some exercise, I get some fresh air, I appreciate my neighborhood, and it's just fun. As adults, we forget we need to have fun. So that's why I'm doing that.
Maybe that's what the problem is with the millennials, are our kids. We're forgetting they have to have fun too.
Well, I also want to mention that my husband Tim is shooting this documentary, and he also edited Who's Next, the millennial documentary. He's a news photographer, and we've been married close to 22 years, and we've always been partners in what we do. And so he's out today shooting news someplace, and then at night when he gets home, we work on our documentaries. And
how wonderful to have that
together.
Nice. Lisa Mills, thank you so much. I can't wait to hear how everybody feels about this once it's out there. This documentary sounds so interesting, and I can't wait to see what our children do with the world.
It'll be interesting. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And thank you for joining us. See you next time.